Mr. Gates, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to talk to you.
Good to see you. So why do you believe that climate change is the toughest challenge humanity will ever face? Agriculture, that is 1/5 of the cause in that chart that we showed everybody earlier. And you write, the American-style diet is responsible for almost as many emissions as all the energy Americans use. That takes a minute to really to digest that. What should we change in our diet? What have you changed in your diet?
Well, there are some Tesla equivalents here, people like Beyond Meat and Impossible, that are creating a category where instead of using a cow, they use proteins made in a factory. And so there's no animal cruelty, there's none of this greenhouse gas release, none of the manure. Now, they're like electric cars, they're a pretty small part of the market, 1 or 2%. But when the burger chains offered that as an option, even with a slightly higher price, the demand was very strong. And so as the volume of that goes up, those costs will come down and the quality will get to the point where you won't be able to tell the difference. You can still tell, but boy, have they made massive progress. And so, we're not telling people that you won't have any hamburgers in the future. For people who want to stop eating meat, that actually is helpful. But I don't think, we'll get to zero by asking everyone to be a vegetarian.
Right. And I know you're investors in both of those companies, Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger, but they do currently still need plants in order to make those foods. And I know you're invested also in a company that will create microbes that ultimately replace that is more green, just changing how our diet actually works. You talk to my kids. I have preteens, essentially, and they have learned about how much methane and cow flatulence contributes to climate change. You write in the book, I know probably much to Melinda's dismay, quote, burping and farting natural gas is a problem that's unique to cows. So that's the question, because kids ask it. Does that mean we have to end beef production? Does that mean we end eating steaks and hamburgers?
Well, there are people who are looking at how you feed the cows, or maybe you capture, the front or the back, and that is worth pursuing. There are people who don't like the animal cruelty, and so now this artificial meat type approach, they like that, not just from a greenhouse gas point of view. So those approaches are going to compete with each other. A lot of Americans will be eating burgers, forever. And so we need a way of making that that's not a lot more expensive and not inferior. And so it's very similar to the electric car learning curve, a little bit of subsidy, a little bit of, consumers driving up the volume because they care about climate will get us to the point where I believe that green premium will also be zero, that you just won't be able to tell the difference.
But I read in one of the interviews you gave in the last week or two, it was just published, you said rich nations should move to 100% synthetic beef.
Yeah, unless we can make the cow zero emission, which, I'm not sure we can. We do need to get rid of those emissions. And, it's not going to happen overnight. The scale up and the innovation still required there is quite large. But yes, zero is a very demanding number. And it doesn't allow you to say, well, all but, the 6% that comes from cows.
Mm-hmm. How do you address that? Because I can imagine people at home are saying, I'm not doing that. What he's talking about is crazy. I'm not doing that. We're not going to stop eating hamburgers. We're not going to stop. I work, I farm cattle. We're not going to stop doing that. I'm not going to change my way of life because of something that he's talking about is going to happen in 30 years. How do you address that?
Well, it's the same, for gasoline cars. The companies are seeing that they need to change. And it's phenomenal. GM, which is, created along with Ford, the global car industry, is now saying that, the gasoline engine days are numbered.
And Mary Barra and GM have also recognized that a younger consumer base is also going to want that product.
Exactly. This movement needs that generation to stay committed to this cause. Without that, we're not going to get there, because it does require ways to drive innovation. And it does, in some cases, require things being a bit more expensive as we get through this transition. And so this is going to be hard. It requires a lot of commitment. We can't go for 4 years and stop for 4 years. But the young generation, I think, will demand it.
We analyze the different components that make those beautiful cuts and try to figure out which are the key components that we need to mimic in order to achieve those beautiful cuts of meat. We identified 3 main components: the muscle, the blood, and the fat. These are the components that we need to mimic in order to reach the perfect, beautiful steak.
Our technology can create whole muscle cuts just as a cow can produce that in a much more efficient way with a lower cost, and of course it's much better for the environment. This is the biggest problem we face today as humanity, and this is the best way to fight climate change, to deliver healthier solution and food to the entire population of the planet. We can do the entire cow, not only one part of the cow. Steaks, roast, slow cooking, grilling, everything that an animal can do, we want to do the same or even better. We want to work with more and more chefs around the world, more and more meat distributors, and we don't see a reason that this can't be in the table of everybody in every country around the world.
By the way, with the rise of technology and the future of food, might be very different than what we have now, especially since most of our favorite foods are now printable. RT's Trinity Chavez has more on this story.
With the rise of culinary 3D printers, most of our favorite foods are printable, and the stakes are high as the 3D printing industry races to perfect printed meat. From cakes to candy.
We have 10 different colors and flavors.
Even to pizzas.
The machine that you see here, it's a pizza maker.
It seems like most of our favorites are just a 3D print away, but now the culinary world is on a much larger project. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, industrialized agriculture is responsible for a significant portion of our air pollution, biodiversity decline, climate change, and land degradation. So researchers from a variety of startups are now tackling the problem to create meat without using an animal to help meet future demand.
The current livestock system is unsustainable for the environment, and it's important to find a solution to this urgent problem.
3D printed meat aims to reduce greenhouse gases, promote a cruelty-free way to satisfy the demand for meat, and provide a sustainable protein source for all consumers, especially since the world's population is expected to reach 9 billion by 2050.
When I was able to build a tissue that really resembled an animal tissue, I thought, why can't I use this technology and apply this to gastronomy so that I could generate a meat substitute?
Growing meat in a lab could cut greenhouse gas emission caused by agriculture to drop 78% to 96% while using 99% less land. And now companies are also racing to produce cell-based seafood.
We call it cellular aquaculture, and really never having to grow an entire fish. We only grow those cells that you will want to be eating.
Now, the 3D printing technology does allow for customization of the ingredients to accommodate a person's dietary needs, but part of the challenge is to create food to feel and look like the food the consumer expects. Meanwhile, experts say that further in the future, this may be the norm, to get your steak or seared piece of tuna 3D printed on demand. Reporting in New York, Trinity Chavez, RT.
You might think fake meat is healthy and cruelty-free.
Fried chicken tastes great, steak tastes great. Let's just take the amino acids, the fats, from another source and recreate those so that we're taking the animal entirely out of the equation.
It takes more than just amino acids and fat to make fake meat products. Companies like Beyond Meat use more than 60 ingredients to make their foods seem real. And not all these ingredients are good for you. Don't let slick marketing trick you into buying these highly processed foods for you and your family. If you're trying to eat clean, fake meat isn't the answer.
Have you seen any advertising for fake meat? When you compare the levels of sodium, fat, and calories for many of these products, they're often higher than what's in real meat. Fake meats have become the new fad in foods that look and smell like the real thing. But these factory manufactured meats are made with ingredients you won't find in real bacon, chicken fingers, or a burger. Methyl cellulose, which is commonly used as a laxative, is also used to thicken liquid fake meat. Synthetic meat is often treated with vegetable glycerin, which you'll also find in e-cigarette liquids. And artificial caramel coloring, well, the state of California warns that additive may cause cancer. In addition to preservatives and lower nutrition content, manufacturers are using hexane to produce artificial meats. Hexane is a gasoline byproduct that is classified as a neurotoxin. Today, many fake meat products are manufactured using as many as 60 additives, chemicals, and other ingredients that do not naturally occur in real meat. If you don't want real bacon, beef, or chicken, swap the fake meat for a salad or a big side of vegetables. Your body and your family will thank you for it.
And so we need to change cows, just cows alone.
How are we going to do that?
Well, actually, of all the categories, the one that has gone better than I would have expected 5 years ago is this work to make what's called artificial meat. And so you have people like Impossible or Beyond Meat, both of which I invested in.
You eat it as well, and you like it?
Absolutely.
You do. Okay.
You can go to Burger King and buy the Impossible Burger.
All right. Is it healthier for you or just healthier for the atmosphere?
It's slightly healthier for you in terms of less cholesterol. It's, of course, dramatic reduction in methane emissions, animal cruelty, manure management, and the pressure that meat consumption puts on land use.
Bill Gates has been snatching up 242,000 acres of farmland across the U.S., enough to make him the top private farmland owner in America. According to the Land Report, the tech billionaire has been purchasing agricultural land for years, building a massive portfolio of farmland in 18 states. His largest holdings are more than 69,000 acres in Louisiana, almost 48,000 acres in Arkansas, and about 20,500 acres in Nebraska. Additionally, he has a stake in 25,750 acres of traditional land in Phoenix, Arizona, which is being developed as a new suburb. It's not clear how Gates' farmland is being used or whether any of the land is being set aside for conservation. This is not Gates' only foray into agriculture. In 2008, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced $306 million in grants to promote high-yield, sustainable agriculture among farmers in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. The foundation also invested in the development of supercrops resistant to climate change and higher-yield dairy cows. While Gates may be the country's biggest farmland owner, he's not the largest individual landowner. According to the Land Report's list of the top 100 American landowners, Liberty Media chair John Malone is the largest landowner with 2.2 million acres of ranches and forests.
Forward TV. The world is thinking.
So are you for or against genetically modified food?
Well, what our foundation is doing is we're working with partners. For example, DuPont Pioneer on some new maize things, with ADM on some cocoa growing things. Some of these are traditional breeding, and some of them are transgenic. In parallel, we're also funding scientific expertise in Africa. So when 3 or 4 years from now, if things go as expected, there are some crops with big benefits, drought resistance, that the transgenic approach probably can do better than any other approach. Each country can decide what are the benefits to them and what are the risks, what's known about safety, IP licensing, and things that would make them hesitant. And then, they'll, on their own, be able to make that decision. The likelihood that the safety profile will be okay and then that will be beneficial, I hope that works out, because it is a tool, particularly for disease resistance, where you can put in a new gene called an RNA interference gene, a new gene called an RNA interference gene,
a new gene called an RNA interference gene
for a particular crop problem. It would be a real help. And you're right on the verge of starvation all the time, so every tool that's safe and appropriate, you at least want to look into.
I want to get to your latest book because you widen, I would say, your attacks is not only Monsanto and the likes, but also others. You attack what you describe as the billionaire dictators, especially one man, I should say, Bill Gates, who you describe as the Christopher Columbus, I'm quoting you, of modern times, and that's not a compliment, obviously, whose mission is to impose, quote unquote, genetically modified organisms and digital dictatorship to small farmers across the world. Bill Gates, who's donated billions to improve public health in poor countries and so on, you're saying essentially he's a dictator and he's there not to help, but to make people poorer, more dependent.
Well, Bill Gates is actually continuing the work of Monsanto because Monsanto had so many movements, and we held a tribunal on Monsanto. A buyer bought up Monsanto, but when Bill Gates pours money into Africa for feeding the poor in Africa and preventing famine, what's he doing? He's pushing the failed green revolution. He's pushing chemicals, pushing GMOs, pushing patents, and now pushing new...
Knowingly, or he thinks it's a good thing and he may be wrong?
Well,
it's not the same thing.
There's enough evidence of what it does. There are enough letters to him from farmers of Africa, from governments of Africa to say, this is not the way to go. The United Nations accepts agroecology, working with ecological systems, as the best way to go. Now, Bill Gates is trying very hard to shift the patenting issue now to digital. So you just take a genomic map and you say, my invention, you don't create a seed. Seed is self-organized, self-making, and evolution in continuity. Just by making a map, a genome, and you have no idea what the seed does. And this is something he's pushing very, very hard. My book records how he financed DivSeek. I've talked about how he's pirated seeds we have saved that tolerates salt and floods. And he says invention. This biopiracy is a bit like Columbus, where Columbus is supposed to have discovered America when he basically went as a pirate. Why do I call him today's Columbus? Because he's carving out new colonies. Software should have stayed open software.
So you say he has a strategy, a nefarious strategy, what you describe as philanthrocapitalism, is a nefarious enterprise. And so you're not saying he's using the wrong methods, he's pursuing a wrong goal with self-interest. You also attack Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, saying they're all linked together. I mean, this reeks a bit of conspiracy theory, doesn't it?
Well, my book is based on the new evidence that's coming out. All you have to do is see the ownership, and I have data in the book on how there's common ownership. We stopped Mark Zuckerberg from trying to get into Indian agriculture. It was a big mobilization of people who believe in the open internet.
What did he want to do?
Well, basically what they do is they mine the data from the farmers. And right now, all over the world, there's new debates on privacy issues, on the data mining. There's new books on new form of capitalism, which is surveillance capitalism, where you basically have turned human beings into your new raw material. So Bill Gates does both. He takes living resources and our seeds and biodiversity, mines it into data and wants ownership along with his friends. And Mark Zuckerberg mines your data and your behaviors and turns it into the raw material, both of corporate world for selling things, which is why strange advertisements pop up after you've sent a message to a friend, and manipulating elections. I have a chapter in the book on the hijack of democracy. You have enough data on what happened with Facebook selling data to Cambridge Analytica and how we are popping up with artificial intelligence leaders. This is a major threat to democracy.
So this is why you're calling them billionaire dictators, because you think they're not helping democracy, but actually threatening and even killing it? I mean, isn't this too much?
No, I have grown up in an India that was post-independence. I've grown up in an India that had absolutely no corporations. I've grown up in an India where democracy works. And therefore, when I see the imposition of digital transactions and criminalization of cash between poor people, I basically see this as a dictatorship. I call it digital dictatorship. When I watch not just in India, but in Africa and other parts of the world. Now that we have the data that is showing that native seeds have more nutrition, they produce more food, they have no cost because you don't have to use chemicals, that local biodiversity is the way to feeding the world, in spite of all that evidence, in spite of the evidence in the United Nations, in the FAO, in UNCTAD, every agency, Bill Gates is still imposing and forcing GMOs, which is a failed enterprise. And he's not just imposing GMOs, he's taking what has failed and rejected by governments. My government threw the BT aubergine of Monsanto out. Bill Gates resurrects it in Bangladesh. We rejected the golden rice for solving the problem of blindness. He finances it to continue through Philippines. So he's taking all the failed projects with the wrong thinking that life is like a word program and can be chopped and cut and pasted, when it's an amazing complexity of self-organization, and scientists call it autopoiesis, self-organization, writing your own poetry. That's what life does. He is absolutely ignoring all of this new knowledge that new science is giving us and imposing a failed technology with a huge cost to the planet, only so there can be monopolies and people and farmers aren't free to have their seed.
Vandana Shiva, obviously you have strong views and we're happy that you were able to share them with us. Thank you very much for watching this interview here on France 24.